we're going to go ahead and start is I want to tell you a little bit about my life. So I'm going to tell you about a time that happened around 10 years ago when I was living in Vancouver, BC. I felt the pavement under my feet as the smell of the street permeated my clothes. As I looked around, there was people, homeless individuals like myself, sitting around, huddled under blankets and having stocking caps on. Their coats were really warm, but for them, they were just trying to get any little bit of warmth that they could. For me, as the SkyTrain went overhead, the rumble of it seemed to just bring so much comfort to my heart with where I was at in that moment. And not only did it bring comfort to my heart, but in some way, it seemed to go ahead and drown the internal screams that I was hearing and that I was feeling. Every time somebody who was nicely dressed, they would walk past me, it was almost like disdain would come from them. They would look at me and they would pretend like I was this parasite that could leach onto their clothes, pulling what ounce of being that they had with them out of them. As families would walk past, their kids would be walking beside them and they would pull them in tighter. And I would hear the loud whispers being passed from one person to the other person as they told their children, yes, she's homeless. In those moments, I felt so unworthy. I felt so unvalued. I felt so unhuman. I felt so unseen. And yet, in those moments, as those individuals would walk past and as ladies would go ahead and hold their purses in tighter, afraid that I was going to steal something, or as other teenage boys would go past making obscure gestures, creating realities that had been my existence, I just felt completely awful. On a daily basis, I would actually find myself looking at the pavement and turning my head away because I did not want people to see the tears that would go down my face. I did not want people to see how broken I was because in those moments, I wanted to be seen. And I don't know where you guys are at today, but it's potentially possible, no matter how popular you are, that maybe you want to be seen. So in between being sold for sex and being trafficked, which I know John has talked about as being parts of my story, I would find myself actually eating in soup kitchens and picking up shoes from the clothing closet because mine were often stolen from me. That was something that was of high value on the streets when I was homeless. And so as I'd go pick up new shoes and would put them on, and I would, in those moments, just simply yearn for that smile and a spark of compassion from other people. The minutes seemed to go ahead and slowly turn into hours, which then slowly turned into weeks. And as it slowly turned into weeks, I do not remember the exact day that this experience happened, but I will never forget the individual who changed my life forever. For you see, as I was kind of in that moment staring down at the ground, I was very much not aware of people walking around me. I was kind of zoning out when all of a sudden I heard a voice, and this voice said, as I was staring at the ground, she said, "Would you like some hot chocolate?" In that moment, I found my head going from looking down to looking up. And as my eyes began to focus on her, I began to see that she had these most beautiful blue eyes. And within her blue eyes, there is so much love and so much compassion. And she was looking at me and she was saying, "Would you like some hot chocolate?" Now, a secret about me is that I love hot chocolate, even to this day. And so as I nodded my head yes, she went ahead and she poured me some hot chocolate. She had on a red vest. She had on a backpack full of hot chocolate that said the Salvation Army on it. And as she went ahead and filled that glass for me, she then took out some whipped cream and put the whipped cream on the top of the glass. And as she handed it to me, for the very first time, I felt human because she saw me as human. Which her seeing me as human actually was such a very vital and important thing for me, because that then enabled me to see myself as human, which then enabled me to go ahead and escape my second trafficking situation, which then enabled me to go ahead and get back to Colorado, which then enabled me to go ahead, and when I was back in Colorado, I was able to go ahead and go back to school, actually go to school for the very first time in my life, and that is where I met Crispy. And I met Crispy at school as I was doing my bachelor's degree, and that is such a vital moment, because that woman, she made a difference in my life, and that is the reason why I am standing here today. She was a normal person who made a drastic difference in my life that has completely changed my present and my future. It's amazing, because the person we're going to be looking at today, the story that we're going to be looking at today, was a person, a woman, who had nothing special about her, and yet God used her in the Old Testament to go ahead and change the lives of the people within her spheres of influence, which then has directly come to us today. And because that woman, Ruth, was faithful in the small things, she has directly impacted us today. And so we're going to be looking at how her life and her story and her willingness to be different has changed our legacy. So I'd like you to just come on this journey with me. It's a journey that I am on as well. I have a lot to learn, and so I would just like to go ahead and invite you to journey with me as we look at Ruth in the Old Testament. To start with, we need to look at the story before Ruth enters the picture. Because there is a man by the name of Elimelech. And Elimelech was married to a woman by the name of Naomi. And Elimelech and Naomi, they had 2 kids. One of their kids' names was Mahlon, and the other kid's name was Chilion, which I know are just completely abstract names, and I would never name my kids Mahlon and Chilion today, and yet those are the names of the kids that they had. And so Elimelech, Naomi, Mahlon, and Chilion, they lived in Bethlehem. And I want you to go ahead and just keep that word of that town in your mind for just a little bit, because we're going to be coming back to that. Bethlehem is where they lived. But a great famine came over the land, and they who were in Bethlehem, they went ahead, and Elimelech was like, we need to move. And so they went ahead and they moved from Bethlehem all the way to Moab. The thing here is that Moab was over a 2,000-mile journey for them to get to. So on one hand, it was a really good thing, because that means that they could have food in Moab. But on the other hand, it was a place that necessarily wasn't the most exciting place to be, because it took them a long time to go ahead and get there. It says that it could take them about 20 to 25 miles each day. It would take them over 100 days to go ahead and walk from Bethlehem to Moab. But not only that, in Moab, they worshiped other gods, and they had all of these other pagan religions, so it was not a Christian place for them to be. And so here they were, they're now living in Moab, when all of a sudden, Elimelech dies, which left Naomi to be a widow. So as Naomi is a widow in this place where they do not worship her God, her sons go ahead and they actually go ahead and get married. One marries this person by the name of Orpah, and the other one marries a person by the name of Ruth. And it's Ruth that we're going to be looking at today. So, we don't know how long they were in Moab before disaster strikes again, but we do know that disaster strikes again, and Mahlon and Chilion actually went ahead and died. Now we have 3 widows. We have Naomi, who's a widow, we have Orpah, who's a widow, and we also have Ruth, who's a widow. It was as Naomi was in the fields and she was working that she heard that the famine in Bethlehem had actually finished and had passed. And she made this decision that she was going to go ahead and go from Moab all the way back to Bethlehem, which, if you guys recall, that is 2,000 miles away. It's like us walking from Denver all the way to New York City, plus adding 300 miles on top of that. So she was like, all right, Orpah, all right, Ruth, I want you to come with me. So in that culture, that was normal, that was typical. So they went ahead and they went with their mother-in-law and started this long journey back to Bethlehem. Now, once again, the scriptures do not say how long they had been walking, but we do know that the scriptures say there came a point in time when Naomi stood and said to her daughter-in-laws that they should not go back with her, that they should return back to Moab, and she'll just keep on going and go back to Bethlehem. And as they protested, it went from one side to the next side and then went back to the other side. As they protested with each other, they realized in that moment that Orpah was going to go back to Moab. But Ruth, which is so amazing, is that she made a choice in that moment that she was going to go ahead and not only go back to Bethlehem with her mother-in-law Naomi, but she was going to go ahead and take care of her. To me, that is just super amazing, and I love that fact because here we see choices. Orpah made the choice to go back, and Ruth made the choice to go all the way back to Bethlehem. And to me, that is so vital because for us to be difference makers, we need to be courageous in the choices that we make. Here we see that, so like I said, Ruth said, do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do thus and so to me. If even death parts me from you. When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said to her, no more to her. And so here we see that Ruth not only left her people, but she also left her culture, and she also left the gods that she knew to go ahead and begin worshiping the God that Naomi worshiped. And to me, that's super vital because when they arrived in Bethlehem, it was the beginning of the barley harvest. And we see here that Ruth was starting to build and formulate this relationship with God that was beginning to change her life, because in this moment, when she arrived in Bethlehem, she was in a place where people did not accept her and did not treat her necessarily with the same grace and kindness that they would have treated Naomi. And so as we look at this, we see that Ruth was super courageous in the choices she made. But she was also super courageous by her obedience to God. So here in the story, Ruth began to go ahead and glean in a barley field because she was not necessarily accepted in that community. And so one way that they were going to be able to eat was if she went ahead and gleaned. Now, in gleaning in Old Testament times was basically going behind the people who were doing the harvesting and picking up each little piece of grain as it fell to the ground. And it says in the Bible that she worked from sun up all the way to sundown with only taking one water break. I don't know about you, but I know that that would have been really hard for me. And she was working in the field. A man by the name of Boaz, he saw her working, and he went up to some of his workers, and he said to some of his workers, "Who is that woman over there?" And his workers were like, "Well, that's Ruth, and she belongs to Naomi. She actually came back from Moab with Naomi and took care of Naomi." And so Boaz, he went to Ruth and talked to Ruth, and he said to Ruth, "Because of what you have done, you can go ahead and continue to glean here." And so Boaz then told his people, "Let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her, and also let grain from the bundles fall purposely for her, leave it, so that she may glean, and do not rebuke her." So basically, he was telling his workers, don't just let her pick up the little grains that you fall and drop, but actually leave stuff that she can go ahead and pick up. And then I will take care of her, and I'll make sure she's protected. I think that's beautiful, because in Ruth's obedience to God, he brought a place where she could go ahead and have safety, where she could go ahead and make sure that she could have security, as well as take care of her mother-in-law. The other thing that we see here is that Ruth was also courageous by being bold. So after Naomi found out where Ruth went, and after she found out that she went to Boaz's field and that Boaz said this to her, she said, "Ruth, did you know he's actually one of our distant relatives?" Which is actually a pretty cool thing, because in Old Testament culture, they had this thing called a kinsman redeemer, which basically, without going into a lot of technical detail, basically means that this person, this kinsman redeemer, is a relative who could go ahead and marry a widow, which then would enable them to now have a legacy and now have the ability to go ahead and be financially safe as well as physically safe, and then they could also have children, which would mean for them, once again, there would be also a greater level and status within the community. So many interconnections, and that's a very brief answer. But yet, so Naomi finds out that Ruth was in Boaz's field, goes ahead and tells her, "This is our kinsman redeemer," and then says to Ruth, "You're to go ahead and get dressed really beautiful and really pretty. You're going to put on a ton of perfume." And then, as they are doing the threshing and as they're doing the winnowing, which is basically them throwing the barley up in the air and letting the wind blow the husks away so that they could just have the grain, I want you, when they go to bed and the lights are off, to go up to Boaz, take the blanket off his feet, and lay down at his feet. I know, super weird. But yet, culturally, in biblical times, that is actually a very normal and appropriate thing to do. It's not sexual. It's not abnormal. It is a normal and was an appropriate thing to do in biblical culture. Okay, so we need to think about it in the context. And so what Ruth did, she went ahead and she was bold. It would have taken a lot of courage to have done that, and she was bold. And so after Boaz laid down at night, she went ahead and took the blanket off of his feet and lay down at his feet, and he woke up and said, "Who are you, most virtuous woman?" And basically, she said who she was, and he said to her, "You could have gone after all of these young guys. You could have gone after this. You could have gone after that. But you have chosen to show me so much favor." And then he said to her, "There is another kinsman redeemer, somebody who's closer in relationship to you guys that needs to be brought into the conversation. But if he says he does not want to marry you, then I want to marry you." And so then the next day, he goes ahead and he meets with the other kinsman redeemer who said, "I do not want to go ahead and lose my inheritance, and so I do not want to go ahead and marry her." So Boaz took Ruth to be his wife, which to me is super important, because in this moment, Ruth now has a new legacy. She was different. She decided to make courageous choices. She decided to be courageous through her obedience. She decided to be courageous through her boldness. And because of that, what we see is at the end of the book of Ruth, we see that she gave birth to a child. And this child's name was Obed. And what we see is that Obed became the father of Jesse, and Jesse became the father of David, which then ties into the genealogy that we see in Matthew 1. Because in Matthew 1, what I want you to hear today is that what Ruth did has changed generations after generations, just like the woman who gave me the hot chocolate changed my life. And so these names, there's going to be a lot of them, but I believe that it's super important for me to read this genealogy to you. And as I do, I want you to listen for the names of Boaz, Ruth, Obed, and then at the very end, I want you to tell me the last name that you hear. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, and Judah the father of Perez, and Zariah by Tamar, and Perez the father of Hezron, and Hezron the father of Ahab, and Ahiram the father of Amminadab, and Amminadab the father of Nahshon, and Nahshon the father of Salmon, the father of Boaz by Rahab, and Boaz, the father of Obed by Ruth, and Obed, the father of Jesse, and Jesse, the father of King David. And David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah, and Solomon the father of Rehoboam, and Rehoboam the father of Abijah, and Abijah the father of Asaph, and Asaph the father of Jehoshaphat, and Jehoshaphat was the father of Joram, and Joram the father of Uzziah, and Uzziah the father of Jotham, and Jotham the father of Ahaz, and Ahaz the father of Hezekiah, and Hezekiah the father of Manasseh, and Manasseh the father of Amos, and Amos the father of Josiah, and Josiah the father of Jeconiah, his brothers, at the time of the deportation to Babylon. And after the deportation to Babylon, Jeconiah was the father of Salniel, and Salniel the father of Zerubbabel, and Zerubbabel the father of Abad, and Abad the father of Eliakim, and Eliakim the father of Azar, and Azar the father of Zadok, and Zadok the father of Achim, and Achim the father of Elud, and Elud the father of Elenezer, and Elenezer the father of Matan, and Matan the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom Jesus was born, who is called the Messiah. For what happened that Ruth did, her desire to make a difference, an average person who had nothing special about her, is part of the genealogy of Jesus, our Redeemer, and He is our Savior today. I want to talk to you, those of you who are sitting here in this moment feeling like you're saying, well, it's too late for me. I can't make a difference. I've made too many mistakes in my life. I want you to hear in this moment that it's not too late, that you can go ahead and make choices that are courageous, that enable you to go from being that homeless individual into a place where they are able to make a difference in the lives of other people. For those of you who are sitting on the fence going, well, I just want to be average. I just want people to recognize me. I just want to be seen for who I am. I just want to be popular. I want you to know that you hold the power to go ahead and be a difference maker today. But it starts with you. Will you take a courageous step of obedience and choose to go ahead and pursue Jesus with every ounce of who you are? I want you to take a moment to let this really sink in, because Ruth, what she did not only is part of our lineage today because of Jesus, but she went ahead and she went from this tiny village in Moab and she married one of Naomi's sons, and then she became a widow, and then she had to make a choice to go back with Naomi all the way back to Bethlehem, to a new culture, to a new place and a new people, to choose a new God. And the God she chose is our God today. Will you be faithful and being bold? I believe that each one of you holds the power to make a difference in this world that changes our culture. Will you walk into your calling today by doing what God calls you to do? Let's pray. Oh, Abba, I thank you so much that your love for us rests upon each person in this room. So, Holy Spirit, would you come and would you just anoint each person here with such a tenderness? Would you ignite within us how this individual, this woman, Ruth, who made such a difference, how her courage and how her obedience and how her boldness is not just for her, but how each one of us here can go ahead and also be obedient, bold, and courageous. And so, Jesus, we love you. In your name.